call on the first reading of the sale and supply of alcohol extended licensing hours during Rugby World Cup bill.
Mr. Speaker.
Alcohol extended licensing hours during Rugby World Cup bill, first reading.
Speaker, I move that the sale and supply of alcohol extended licensing hours during Rugby World Cup bill be now read a first time. Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to speak on this bill. However, I'm going to keep my remarks very short. Several people have criticised the bill and the Parliament's use of time on this matter. This Parliament debates a great deal of matters, and I don't believe that it is anything but churlish to deny New Zealanders the opportunity to watch the rugby in a pub or club surrounded by their friends, and that we should not begrudge a small amount of Parliament's time to make that possible. Indeed, people have said, is this needed? Well, the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, that we do not need rugby, we do not need pubs, we do not need a Rugby World Cup. Nonetheless, if we took our actions on the basis of what was absolutely needed, we would have a very dreary world indeed. And so I turn the question around and ask, why shouldn't responsible New Zealand adults be able to enjoy watching the game amongst friends and families over breakfast, perhaps a coffee, perhaps a pint, in the fabulous clubs and pubs that our community is lucky to have? Mr. Speaker, the bill in its present form allows for licensed pubs and clubs to open outside of normal licensing hours in certain circumstances. If a Rugby World Cup 2015 game or series of games begins within 2 hours of normal closing time, then that venue will be licensed automatically to stay open under its usual terms, but for until 1 hour after the end of that game. If a game begins more than 2 hours after the usual closing time, then in that case, the licensed venue can reopen, that is, serve alcohol half an hour before kick-off and stay open until 1 hour after the game. However, there are several conditions. The primary purpose of that opening must be to watch the game. They must have at least one television, and they must have a system to ensure that watching the game is the primary purpose. They must display the details of their extensions prominently prior to the extension occurring. They must notify the District Licence Authority and the police at least 1 week before the time of their opening. Mr. Speaker, those are the details of the bill. I expect that there will be some changes in the committee stages over the next 2 weeks. Democracy is about other people choosing from time to time. However, I would just make one point, that the bill in its present form applies to all games of the Rugby World Cup. And I'd like to say, Mr. Speaker, that I'm proud to live in a country that is one of the most diverse and harmonious societies that this world has ever seen. I'm proud of the fact that when the Indian team won the Cricket World Cup, the celebrations in downtown Auckland seemed bigger than the celebrations in downtown Delhi. I'm proud of the fact that at the last Rugby World Cup, Mount Eden Village in my electorate, if I remember it rightly, embraced being the cheer village for the Tongan team in the Rugby World Cup. And I hope that this House will see its way through to have the bill passed for all games, reflecting that New Zealand is a country with 250,000 people of British descent, 50,000 Australians somewhere, many South Africans, Tongans, Samoans, and so it goes on. There are many nationalities or citizenships represented even in this House. Nonetheless, politics is often the art of compromise, and if this bill emerges with at least the All Black Games and finals applied to, then that, I believe, will be a great victory. I'd like to thank my colleagues from around the House from the National Party, from the Labour Party, with the exception of Clayton Cosgrove, and I'd like to thank New Zealand First, and in particular my colleagues in the Greens, who initially disagreed with this course of action, but have shown that they can reach across the aisle and work for a positive outcome for New Zealanders, and of course to my colleagues from the Māori Party and from United Future. All of us have had constructive discussions about this bill because it's fundamentally what New Zealanders want. So with all of that in mind, Mr Speaker, I welcome the debate. I hope that the bill will have a speedy passage through this House and will be able to enable people to do what they want, which is to responsibly enjoy using our community facilities when the games happen to be outside normal licensing hours this 2015 World Cup. And most of all, despite what I've said about our diverse and harmonious culture, I really hope that the All Blacks win. I commend this bill to the House. Thank you, Mr Speaker.